Here is your latest African news. South Africa. Prince Misuzulu officially recognized as South African Zulu King. President Cyril Ramaphosa has recognized King-elect Prince Misuzulu Sinkobile Zulu as King of Amazulu Kingship. This follows the passing of His Majesty King Goodwill Zwelithini Zulu in March 2021 and the subsequent passing away of the Regent Queen Mantfombi Dlamini in April 2021. Dispute over succession of the throne in 2021 saw several members of the Zulu royal family vie for leadership. Sibongile Winfred Zulu, first wife of the late King Goodwill Zwelithini, claimed she was entitled to 50% of the late monarch's estate. Meanwhile, Queen Sibongile's two daughters, Princesses Nkosi Zulu and Tombiso Zuthu Zulu Duma, wanted the court to declare King Zwelithini's will a forged document. In the will, the late king nominated his third wife, the late Mantfombi Dlamini Zulu, as the regent. Queen Dlamini Zulu in turn wrote her own will in which she nominated her own son Misuzulu Sinkobile Zwelithini as the successor of the late Zulu king. Prince Misuzulu's claim to the throne in May 2021 was strongly contested at the time. Algeria. Algeria recalls ambassador to Spain for consultations. Algeria has summoned its ambassador to Spain back for consultations over Madrid's recent comments on Western Sahara, the Foreign Affairs Ministry has said. Spain said the government had informed Algeria about its position in relation to Western Sahara. Spain and Morocco moved to patch up a diplomatic dispute recently as Madrid shifted closer towards Rabat's position on the conflict in Western Sahara and said a new phase in relations had begun. Spain appeared to shift its policy on the Western Sahara, which Morocco considered its own, but where an Algeria-backed independence movement demands a sovereign state. Morocco said it had a letter saying Spain considered the autonomy initiative it presented in 2007 as the most serious, realistic and credible basis for settling the dispute. Spain's new position towards the Western Sahara is an unexpected shift from its previous neutral stance, which was supportive of a United Nations plan that includes a self-determination referendum. DRC. Belgian sanctioned for smuggling DR Congo gold. Belgian gold dealer Alain Ngos and a network of companies have been sanctioned by the US for allegedly smuggling hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gold from the Democratic Republic of Congo. The US government says since 2016, Ngos has been trading illegally in gold that has come from Congolese mines controlled by armed groups who often use forced labor or exploit miners. It is believed that the gold provided the largest source of revenue to armed groups in eastern DR Congo. Alain Ngos and his network have contributed to armed conflicts by receiving DRC gold without questioning its origin. The majority of DR Congo's population do not benefit from the country's vast mineral wealth, and it is estimated that 90% of the gold from DR Congo is smuggled out of the country, much of it to Uganda and Rwanda, before it is sold on to international markets. Somaliland. Washington rejects Somaliland's independence quest. The US government is reluctant to endorse Somaliland's quest for independence, fearing such a policy could have the unintended consequences of breaking up the entire Somalia. Somaliland leader Musa Bihi had visited the US, pitching for sovereignty and demonstrating to the audiences in Washington that his region has run its own affairs for 30 years, but officials in the Joe Biden administration insisted the region will be treated as part of Somalia. Somaliland first gained independence and international recognition on 26 June 1960, and 5 days after independence, Somaliland united voluntarily with Somalia with the aim of creating a greater Somalia. It was officially known as the Somali Republic. Mr. Bihi, on his first official tour of the US, said Somaliland no longer feels a part of Greater Somalia, stating the unity between British Somaliland and Italian Somaliland that formed the Somali Republic in 1960 has failed to yield the desired result. Zimbabwe. Chinese coal seam fires burn beneath communities in Zimbabwe. Children are bearing the brunt of underground coal fires in Zimbabwe, and with little help from the government or mining companies, their families must carry the burden. Underground coal seam fires have since late 2021 been causing destruction and even death in Hwange throughout the concession area where the colliery operates. The burning has caused the ground to be unstable, putting the lives of people, particularly children, as well as the community's livestock at risk. Some of the areas have signs warning people of the dangers, but they are of little value if the areas are unfenced. Despite Zimbabwe's abundant potential for renewable power, the country is embarking on a coal power building spree, much of it to be built and financed by Chinese companies. The Hwange Colliery Company Limited, HCCL, has said it is addressing threats associated with the coal seam fires by working with industry professionals and local communities.
West Africa. ECOWAS envoy leaves Mali without deal on poll date. Former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan has ended a 2-day visit to Mali without any agreement on a date for elections to return the country to civilian rule. The military government in Mali, which seized power in 2020, said it regretted the lack of compromise at this stage. Mr. Jonathan is mediating in Mali on behalf of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. He had sought to pin down a date for free elections, having previously said an initially proposed 5 years was too long. The ECOWAS and the European Union imposed sanctions on members of interim President Assimi Goita's inner circle earlier this year after the military authorities in Mali junked a plan for February elections. Rwanda. Government designates 134 hectares for medicinal cannabis production. Rwanda has dedicated 134 hectares to cannabis production last year. The country publicly showcased its plan to start growing and exporting the plant and its products. To the effect of this, a ministerial order was gazetted in June, providing a framework for responsible and secure cultivation, processing, distribution, and use of cannabis in the country. Now, a few months since then, a number of steps have been taken towards starting the operations, among which include the government designating a specific area of 134 hectares to cannabis production and is in the process of having the site developed. A significant number of companies have shown interest in the cultivation, processing, and export of cannabis from Rwanda. Mali. Mali records highest cotton production after ditching France. Mali has recorded its largest cotton production of more than 760 tons for the 2021-2022 season. The president of the transition government, Assimi Goita, declared the record production figures that place Mali as the top cotton producer on the African continent, according to the government. Record production was made possible by maintaining a subsidy on agricultural inputs, maintaining a minimal shift in the cost of cotton seen among other initiatives. Mali planted a record 795,000 hectares up to 630 hectares from last year's crop. At the end of the 2019-2020 season, Mali's cotton production totaled 700,000 tons, up to 6.6% from 2018-2019. Cotton producers boycotted the 2020-2021 cotton season following a misunderstanding with the authorities over the price of cotton seeds set by the government. Finally, in 2018, Mali was ranked as the leading cotton producer on the continent with 725,000 tons of cotton seeds, according to data from the Malian Textile Development Company. South Africa. South African court suspends construction of Amazon's headquarters. A court in South Africa ordered the suspension of the building works of Amazon's African headquarters. The court ruling takes the side of indigenous communities who hold the site sacred. The ruling ordered the developers to hold meaningful consultations with the Khoisan people who first resisted Portuguese colonists on the site in 1510. In the previous ruling issued on the 18th of March, the court acknowledged that the fundamental right to culture and heritage of indigenous groups, particularly the Khoi and San First Nations people, is threatened in the absence of proper consultation. Construction of the $254 million building complex is already underway. Previously, the site was being used as a golf course, while the city of Cape Town approved construction of the Amazon site, saying it will create thousands of jobs and give a boost to South Africa's COVID-19 ravaged economy. The plan quickly drew criticism from members of the Khoisan people. Uganda. Uganda bids to host Africa Drugs Agency. President Museveni has said Uganda has invested in the development and manufacture of many medicines over the years and therefore has the required capacity to host the African Medicine Agency (AMA). According to the president, Uganda already has experience in manufacturing aid drugs for the last 10 years under Cipla Quality Chemical Industries Limited. Uganda is among the 8 African countries including Rwanda, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Algeria, Egypt, Tunisia, and Morocco bidding to host the agency. The new agency will provide a streamlined regulatory authority that would provide quality medicines access and combat substandard imports. The president said Uganda has invested heavily in the medical sector with more infrastructure given its history with pandemics such as HIV and AIDS, Ebola, Marburg, and now coronavirus. On November 1, 2021, Uganda became the 26th AU member state to sign the treaty to establish African Medicines Agency (AMA) at the AU Commission in Addis Ababa. AMA aspires to enhance the capacity of state parties and AU-recognized regional economic communities to regulate medical products to improve access to quality, safe, and efficacious medical products on the continent. AMA will be the second specialized health agency of the African Union after the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention. South Africa. Major court victory for communities fighting air pollution in Mpumalanga Highveld. Environmental justice groups scored a victory against the government as a high court ruled the poor air quality in the Highveld property area violated a constitutional right. The Highveld property area includes parts of Gauteng and Mpumalanga. It is home to 12 of Eskom's coal-fired power stations, Sasol's coal-to-liquid fuel refinery, and other coal mining operations. Judge Colin Collis handed down the ruling, declaring that poor air quality in the Highveld priority area is in breach of Residents' Section 24A constitutional right to an environment that is not harmful to their health and well-being. The judgment read, the application was first launched by environmental justice groups Groundwork and Vukani Environmental Justice Movement in June 2019. The Minister of Environmental and the National Air Quality Officer are respondents. The case was heard at the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria in May 2021, but the campaign has been going on for 12 years. About 100 African students are pleading for help to leave the Ukrainian port city of Kherson. They have been sheltered for days in underground bunkers on campus in bitterly cold temperatures with no heating or supplies of medicines. The students have said they are traumatized and desperate to leave the southern city. Russian soldiers have also fired shots at people protesting against their occupation. The Nigerian students have applied to their government to help evacuate them before it is too late. Nigeria's government says it is working tirelessly to help them get out. Last week, its ambassador to Moscow was told by a Russian official that plans were being put in place to get the students out through Russia, but that has not happened yet, and in any case the students say they were very wary of being taken to Russia. In the meantime, the students, some of whom are from other countries including Cameroon, Ghana, Egypt, Tunisia, and Morocco, say there was still some food available at the university, but that some supermarkets had run out of supplies. Tanzania is allocating wildlife hunting blocks through auction in a bid to raise more revenue. Tourism Minister Damas Ndumbaro said successful hunters will be allowed to kill aged elephants, lions, and other big game considered unproductive. The East African country is aiming to raise $30 million from the auction. About 25% of the proceeds will be spent in helping communities living near the hunting blocks. The rest will be used on anti-poaching programs, game protocols, transportation, surveillance, and prosecution of offenders. Tanzania is Africa's leading country for big game hunting in unfenced areas. It has approximately half of the world's wild lions population and the third largest elephant population in Africa. Protesters in the country want the government's intervention to end violence against foreign nationals. About 100 people marched to Parliament on Human Rights Day to ask the government to intervene in ongoing xenophobic attacks and campaigns against foreign nationals. The march was organized by the Concerned Citizens of the Western Cape and, according to their memo, is endorsed by 15 organizations. The group is calling for the immediate arrest and prosecutions of those who use threats and violence against foreign nationals working mostly in the informal sector. They also demanded an assessment of actions by people under the banner of Operation Dundula, which is a group that hopes to drive out undocumented African migrants from their communities. The group believes by doing this, they can ensure that jobs and business opportunities go to South Africans. The joint anti-Dundula movement also called for immediate reopening of the refugee reception centers. Pika said this would allow Home Affairs to issue and process documents for asylum seekers and refugees. The Democratic Republic of Congo will officially be admitted to the East African Community next week, adding a 19 million market for the bloc. The East African Community Secretary General Dr. Peter Mathuki, in a letter to ministers in charge of the East African Community docket in member states, confirmed that the heads of state would approve the admission on March 29. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta, who is the current chair of the East African Community, is expected to preside over the summit that also includes President Samia Suluhu Hassan of Tanzania, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni of Uganda, Paul Kagame of Rwanda, Evariste Ndayishimiye of Burundi, and Salva Kiir of South Sudan. The East African Community currently has 193 million citizens. Democratic Republic of Congo's admission would raise that to 280 million people, spanning the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. The mineral-rich country already has established trade ties with most of the East African Community member states through bilateral deals and at a multilateral level, where it is affiliated to Southern African Development Community, where Tanzania is a member. Dozens of well-known leaders in Jamaica, including professors and politicians, are demanding an apology and slavery reparations as the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge prepare for a trip to the former British colony. The group is rejecting the visit of Prince William and Kate, which will be part of a larger trip to the Caribbean region that coincides with the 60th anniversary of Jamaica's independence and the 70th anniversary of the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. Local opposition also forced the royal couple to cancel a visit to a cacao farm in Belize. The upcoming trip to Jamaica has angered some who say they are still awaiting for an apology and slavery reparations. Jamaica lawmaker Mike Henry, who has long led an effort to obtain reparations that he estimates at more than £7 billion, said that an apology is only the first step of what he described as abuse of human life and labor. Hundreds of thousands of African slaves toiled in Jamaica under more than 300 years of British rule and faced brutal conditions. The group say that it will be celebrating 60 years of freedom from Britain, adding that it is saddened that more progress has not been made given the burden of colonial inheritance.
Zimbabwe. Victoria Falls World Heritage status hangs in balance. There are fears that the Victoria Falls could be delisted as a World Heritage Site following massive construction activities on either side of the Zambezi River, which might have tampered with some animal corridors and natural sites. These have been carried out on either sides of the Zambezi River between Zambia and Zimbabwe since the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, added Victoria Falls to the list in 1989. This was based on its unique geomorphological formation and remarkable natural beauty. UNESCO is assessing if the destination still qualifies as a World Heritage Site. As the custodian of this site, UNESCO recently sent a monitoring team to assess the current state of Victoria Falls and its environs. The UN body has the mandate to carry periodic assessments. Tanyaradzwa Mundoga, Deputy Director of Zimbabwe Environment, Climate and Natural Resources, says there is need to safeguard the natural habitat so as to keep Victoria Falls in its pristine state. Victoria Falls falling water blanket is about 1.7 kilometers wide and falls 108 meters down the gorge and is classified as the largest waterfall in the world. The waterfall is within Victoria Falls National Park, which together with the Victoria Falls Bridge attract a significant number of tourists annually. It is one of the 5 World Heritage Sites in Zimbabwe. South Sudan. South Sudan opposition withdraws from peace body. South Sudan's main opposition party has said that they are withdrawing from a body overseeing the young nation's lumbering peace process, dealing a fresh blow to its elusive quest for stability. The Sudan People's Liberation Movement in opposition, led by Vice President Riek Machar, pulled out of the peace monitoring mechanism to protest continued unprovoked attacks of its bases by its peace partner. The withdrawal adds to fissures between factions loyal to Machar and President Salva Kiir that have dragged out the implementation of a fragile 2018 peace agreement that ended fighting between the two men. In 2013, the country was engulfed in a devastating 5-year civil conflict between forces loyal to Kiir and Machar, which claimed thousands of lives and forced millions of people to flee their homes. The two men created a unity government 2 years ago, consolidating a peace pact reached in 2018 that ended the violence. Burkina Faso. Sankara trial resumes after 3-week hiatus. The trial for the October 1987 assassination of the former Burkinabe President Sankara and his colleagues has resumed after the Constitutional Council rejected a defense position. The lawyer assisting the former medical officer charged with forging Sankara's death certificate pleaded for acquittal, while two other defendants' lawyers also pleaded for their clients to be acquitted. Citing the 34-year time lapse between the trial and the acts alleged against the accused, they put forward a statute of limitations and a lack of witnesses. The Sankara trial was suspended in early March after the defense petitioned the Constitutional Council. Citing the Council's approval of the military takeover by Colonel Damiba, the lawyers challenged the charges of crime against national security, asking for them to be dropped on the basis of an exception of unconstitutionality. However, the Council rejected their petition. Nigeria to witness agricultural boom with Dangote's $2.5 billion fertilizer plant. President Muhammadu Buhari has commissioned a new 3 million metric tons capacity per annum state-of-the-art Dangote fertilizer urea plant, with an emphatic assurance that the project would give a huge boost to Nigeria's agricultural sector, with the revitalization being a focal point of his administration's economic policy. The new plant, which he commissioned in the presence of some 18 governors, ministers, captains of industries as well as prominent traditional rulers, is located in Ibeju-Lekki, Lagos Free Trade Zone within the periphery of the Dangote refinery. President Buhari said the coming on stream of the plant would create huge opportunities in the areas of employment, trade, warehousing, transport and logistics, and greatly create wealth, drastically reducing poverty and securing the future of the nation. Dangote stated that the fertilizer plant is rolling out with innovations that would transform the agricultural sector in the form of extension services for small and medium-scale farmers. It has set up a well-equipped fertilizer soil testing laboratory to enable it to analyze and identify soil deficiency and the appropriate fertilizer blend. Guinea's national conference opens in Conakry. Meetings aimed at promoting reconciliation opened in Conakry 6 months after a military coup upset Guinea's constitutional order. Dubbed the National Conference, the meetings to be held over several weeks will bring together political parties, youth groups, women's organizations, traditional leaders, and the civil society to discuss what military leader Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya has called as a new institutional framework for the country. The country's army leaders have not spelled out a schedule for a return to civilian rule despite pressure from West Africa's regional bloc, ECOWAS. It is not clear what the authorities will do with the recommendations of the meetings. In 2016, Guinea held a similar event. Nigerian Ogoni 9 widows lose case against Shell in Netherlands. A Dutch court has rejected a case brought by 4 Nigerian widows against oil giant Shell over their husband's execution by the military regime that ruled their country in the 1990s. They accused Shell of involvement in the arrest, detention, prosecution, and eventual execution of their husbands, who opposed the group's exploitation of oil resources in Ogoni, southern Nigeria. But the Dutch court ruled that their position was based on interpretation and supposition, and that they had no evidence to back their accusations. The widow's complaint alleged that Shell had been involved in corrupting witnesses in the trial of the Ogoni 9, who in November 1995 were convicted by a military tribunal for involvement in the murder of 4 Ogoni leaders. Witnesses had testified to the court that they had signed pre-prepared statements and had been coached to incriminate the defendants in return for the promise of payments and jobs. They said they had been told that the money they received came from Shell. All the defendants insisted they were innocent of the charges against them, and rights organizations including Amnesty have argued that their trial was a sham.
Africa-wide, the European Union wants Africa's support in the Ukraine conflict. The European Union delegation in Tanzania has called for Africa's support in Ukraine-Russia war. The 8 ambassadors representing Poland, France, Finland, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Sweden, and Spain convened a news conference at the French ambassador's residence in Dar es Salaam. Also present at the conference was the ambassador of the EU delegation to Tanzania. This coercion by the EU comes at a time when almost half of African countries, including Tanzania, abstained from voting at the UN Security Council when the issue was brought to vote on March. Leading the delegation was the French ambassador Nabil Hajlaoui, who expressed dismay towards Russia's aggression and said that France, along with the international community, condemned the move by Russia. He said all of Africa should join Europeans in condemning the Ukraine war. Ethiopia. Ethiopian government declares indefinite unilateral truce to allow aid into Tigray. Ethiopia's government has declared an indefinite humanitarian truce effective immediately, saying it hopes to help hasten delivery of emergency aid into the Tigray region, where hundreds of thousands face starvation. Since war broke out in northern Ethiopia in November 2020, thousands have died and many more have been forced to flee their homes as the conflict has expanded from Tigray to the neighboring regions of Amhara and Afar. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government has said it is committed to exert maximum effort to facilitate the free flow of emergency humanitarian aid into the Tigray region. Fighting has dragged on for over a year, triggering a humanitarian crisis. Humanitarian organizations have been forced to increasingly curtail their activities because of fuel and supply shortages and theft by the TPLF. The government previously declared a unilateral ceasefire in Tigray in June last year after the TPLF retook the region from federal force, but fighting intensified in the second half of 2021 before reaching a stalemate. Zimbabwe. Nangawa threatens to expel NGOs. President Emerson Nangawa has threatened to expel non-governmental organizations from Zimbabwe, saying they have lost their mandate. Addressing delegates at a ZANU-PF campaign rally, Nangawa said NGOs that defy his government's policy will be chased out of the country. This comes at a time his administration is in the middle of enacting a private voluntary organization which will regulate the operation of NGOs in the country. The PVO bill has provisions that seek to criminalize the work of non-governmental organizations by proposing harsh penalties including jail time of up to 1 year for perceived offenses. The bill also gives the government and the minister responsible for CSOs and trusts excessive powers, which will enable them to interfere with the operations of these bodies, giving it the potential to disrupt non-governmental organizations, NGO activities, and financing. NGOs will be required to submit their plans and work to the government. Mali. Mali sees some sanctions suspended. The Court of the West African Economic and Monetary Union has ordered the suspension of its sanctions against Mali, pending a detailed court ruling. The body spokesperson said, in January, the organization instructed the suspension of all financial institutions under its wing in Mali after its ruling military government decided to delay elections meant to restore civilian rule after coups in 2020 and 2021. A month ago, the military government, which had repeatedly asked for the sanctions to be lifted, filed a complaint with the UEMOA Court of Justice to overturn the decision. According to the interim government, the sanctions have severe consequences for the population, with Bamako blaming them for debt defaults worth $180 million since January. The court's ruling does not apply to sanctions imposed by the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. The regional bloc, which is organizing an extraordinary summit of the situation in Mali, froze Malian state assets and suspended non-essential financial sanctions. Mali's military leader, Colonel Assimi Goïta, has been invited to take part in the meeting but has not confirmed his attendance yet. Africa-wide. French presidential candidate threatens to seize African leaders' homes if they don't take back immigrants. French presidential candidate Eric Zemmour has said that he could seize the homes of African leaders and block remittances to their countries if they fail to take back immigrants, as he seeks to reboot his flagging campaign. A former political commentator has made immigration and security the center of his campaign and say that if elected, he would create a ministry of re-immigration that would forcefully deport hundreds of thousands of African immigrants over his 5-year term. Kenya. Fire destroys 6,500 acres of Mount Kenya forest. A raging fire has destroyed more than 6,500 acres of moorland in the Mariana section of Mount Kenya forest. According to Kenya Forest Service, the fire that broke out over the weekend was spreading fast due to hot weather and strong winds. Despite deployment of firefighters from KFS, Kenya Wildlife Service, Kenya Defense Forces, Mount Kenya Trust, Rhino Ark and the community, the fire was still spreading. The efforts by the firefighters have been hampered by the rugged terrain rain, which has made it impossible for water bruisers to access the area. Mount Kenya Trust has been on the forefront in fighting the fire and states that the fire reignited hours after being successfully put out. The severity of the wildfires have had adverse effects on the natural ecosystem, killing hundreds of wildlife in the process of cutting down the vegetation. Mount Kenya, which is the second highest mountain in Africa, is a heritage site and contains different types of wildlife, lakes, glaciers, dense forest, and mineral springs. The fires have some ecological effects like increased erosion and water runoffs. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, follow, share and like our video. It's the best way of supporting us. Great news! You can now buy our Africans children's book Maua and the Gardens of Plenty, a book that teaches children the power of great ideas. This book is the best way to start exposing your children to African stories told by Africans. Find the purchase link in the description below. You can directly support this new series by becoming our YouTube member, Patreon or donor. And remember, Africa is watching.